Good morning, everyone. I'm Diana. I'm the admin over at ANBLPN, and welcome to this morning's webinar. So before we get started, we would like to just take a moment to wish all of our members and all nursing professionals a happy Nursing Week. Your dedication to the work you do each and every day is so important and very much appreciated in our communities and by all New Brunswickers. And always be proud of the work that you do. So today's webinar, Workplace Civility, is presented by Cheyanne Culbert. So as a registered nurse for 20 years, Cheyanne has incorporated professionalism and exemplary standards into her career spanning acute care, long-term care, teaching nursing students, research coordination, and senior nursing leadership positions. She is the founder and CEO of Beacon Clinical Group, a healthcare and education consulting group. As an advanced practice nurse with a master's degree in nursing education, Cheyanne was recognized in 2021 on an international level as a fellow in-person centered care by Planetary International. So good morning, Cheyanne.
Wonderful, and thank you for inviting me. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this session. So I was asked to talk about workplace civility, and I actually will be back again for another webinar on leadership later on in the week. So what is workplace civility? And what is our role as nurses? So my company, Beacon Clinical Group, we have a workshop that we do, and we've done it recently in quite a few nursing homes across the province, and we've booked for a few more coming up to do this workplace civility training. So the goal of it is to promote respectful and considerate behavior on part of all members of the workforce. And so usually when employers are offering it, they're seeking to reduce some staff conflicts, or maybe there's some concerns about bullying in the workplace. So what is civility? So civility is a behavior that shows respect toward another person, makes that person feel valued, contributes to mutual respect, it's effective communication, and it involves team collaboration. So that is the environment that we all want to work in. We want to work in a civil environment where those behaviors are being demonstrated. But unfortunately, in healthcare, that's not always the case. So I always like to say that civility is the thing that costs nothing but buys everything. I find that's a good quote to capture it. So again, in terms of when civility training is delivered, the goal is that it's engaging all members of the workforce in discussions about what is respectful behavior at work, talking about what are the norms, and doing some skill building for that positive interpersonal communication and conflict resolution. So what's really fascinating is that this has become a very hot topic, an emerging topic in research and in healthcare. And so I did a research review looking back, and probably about 10, 15 years ago, you start to see this topic coming out in research, and it's different keywords are used. Sometimes it's workplace incivility, bullying, lateral violence is another one that I hear. So there's just a lot of different data and research that's out there to describe this phenomenon. And unfortunately, it does happen in our profession. It happens in other professions as well, but it is found to be in ours. And I've read a few different topics, a few different research. And the most recent research I could find on this was about late 2019, saying that amongst new grads, 90% of new grads said that they had experienced an incident of workplace incivility. And then when they looked at nurses overall, it was about at a 70%. So as this has become an emerging topic, there's actually books and things being published about it and talking about those things. So this is one book that's out there. So if this is a real passion of yours, I just wanted to provide a resource where you can do more reading. So the author is Stephen Carter, and his book is called Incivility: Manners, Morals, and the Etiquette of Democracy. So Stephen really does a great job of describing that our duty to be civil to others shouldn't depend on whether we like them or not. So that must have been something that he really immersed in his research. He talked about civility being the sum of the many sacrifices we're called on for the sake of living together. And that, he really calls us to say that it doesn't mean that we're going to pretend we don't have differences. But really our focus is on how we resolve them respectfully and how we find a way to express ourselves in ways that shows respect to others. So again, it does allow that criticism, but it should always be civil, and really taking that time sometimes to think before you speak. So what was interesting as I went through the research is there was something that came out that was really prevalent. And it found that one of the biggest barriers to civility was, and it was described differently in different articles, but I liked this one and how they did it. They referred to it as a bitter bag. So the bitter bag is something that apparently nearly all of us carry. And it's that bag where we stash our grievances. So as the day goes on and someone doesn't hold the door open for you, that kind of gets in the bag. Someone doesn't restock the bedroom, that gets put in the bag. All those different experiences that we have, things just we kind of tend to stash them away in this. So again, it was those, it can be nothing major, but it's those slight rebuffs, injustices, rudeness, maybe someone comes on shift and doesn't say hi, or embarrasses you, or just other wrongs that we feel have befallen us. And so what happens is those little incidences are so small that we really rarely address them in the moment. Instead, what we do is we toss them into this virtual or imaginary bitter bag. And what happens with that bitter bag, unfortunately, is that we almost just carry it around with us. And they describe in research that we take the bag home and we mull over those wrongs. And sometimes we're distorting the facts when we're doing that. But we basically think that because of what we have in this bitter bag, it gives us permission to be less civil to our perpetrators. Okay. So I just thought that's a really interesting way to describe it. And certainly resonates with me when I think of some things. And so really just encouraging us all that until we begin to empty that bitter bag and move forward, it can be challenging to be committed to civility. It can just be that barrier. So everyone has different ways of releasing things from that bitter bag, and hopefully you all work with employers that have great EFAP programs. Some people need some more formal support to work through those things. Some people are just okay with, acknowledging, okay, no, that's what I'm doing. I'm holding on to this and I need to let that go, or I need to address it. So what are some strategies to promote civility? Okay, and so this part is really just focused on us, and sometimes that's all we can control within a workplace is ourselves and our own practice. So a few suggested strategies. So one is to really know your triggers. Know what words, actions, and gestures will set you off. And so sometimes that can be, if you know that when you come in and you see that you're working short, like that, just, your heart rate changes. You can feel some changes in yourself. Just know that, okay, that's a trigger for me. It could be other things, that go on, but so even just the fact that you're acknowledging that it's a trigger for you. So we can't control what others do or say, but we can control our response. So, and sometimes by knowing that trigger and feeling that escalation within ourselves, then we can take that time to really think about what we're going to say and consider the impact of our words or actions. Second thing is just do an honest assessment of your own behavior and just thinking about, okay, in the run of a day on my unit, wherever I'm working, am I contributing to civility or am I contributing to incivility? And it just says, in some of the research, ask a trusted friend for feedback here. And sometimes that feedback can be hard to hear. But I think it is important to do that self-check-in. And also try not to jump to conclusions or to assume that you know everyone's intent. And I've heard that, like, well, she knew, like she didn't restock the bedroom and that was just going to make it a harder morning for me. And I know she did that on purpose and she does that when I work. Well, we don't actually know that. And so when we jump to those conclusions or we make those assumptions, sometimes that can add more things into the bitter bag and can lead to more incivility in the workplace. Another suggestion is try to walk in the other person's shoes. So try to get some context for their words or actions. Another great one is that when rumors or gossip come your way, just let them go in one ear and out the other. And when anything happens on the unit, resist trying to look for someone to blame. So sometimes the situations that we end up in healthcare really are a reflection of a systemic shortcoming of the whole system, not necessarily an individual. Not always, but oftentimes there are some challenges just in terms of the entire system. Another great suggestion is at times kind of take the temperature of your unit, just kind of see how things are going. And sometimes people can use a little bit of proactive kindness. So, I worked in one unit one time, and we just decided that we were all going to bring in a case of pop and we were going to have different varieties, and we were just going to keep it in the fridge. And we just kind of needed that to get through the tough week we were in. And so just doing a quick check-in with the unit to see if anybody even needs a hand. Sometimes us being that proactive, positive person can really help to change the pulse of the unit. Just encouraging us to listen more and talk less, just try to show respect for others' opinions. And this is an important one. We should really try to seek common ground, even if it's to agree to disagree. And so sometimes we can get really heated in the moment about that we have a different opinion. And sometimes it's best just to verbalize, I have a different opinion than that. And this is where we land, but what's our plan for moving forward? And that can be a really positive strategy. Making sure that we go out of our way to say thank you to others. This is so important. Even if we're not feeling it on the inside, just expressing that gratitude really helps to build a civil workplace. And making sure that when you get credit for something, you spread that credit around to anybody who helped you. So if the physician comes in and he's super pleased with how a wound is healing and wanting to give all that praise, that's great. And maybe we're just acknowledging, and so-and-so was on yesterday and they did a really good job. And thank you, everybody. And passing that positive feedback along to the whole group. The other suggestion is just sometimes it's helpful to take the time to make sure it's safe. You're in a safe, quiet place, or that they're in a good spot when you need to have a dialogue with another person. So that's kind of a general overview of workplace civility and incivility and some general suggestions. I'm going to go into a bit more of a detailed scenario that we can see play out in healthcare systems, and it's called the drama triangle. So the drama triangles is really interesting. It actually emerged through psychology research. So someone named Culbert developed it in the 1960s, but it is still very much used today. It's talked about a lot in relationship-based therapy, also in workplaces. So it really says that in a workplace or in a situation, there are 3 different roles. So there's the victim at the bottom, and hopefully you can see it. I know the little black strip might be showing, but there's the victim. There's also the persecutor, and we'll get into these roles in a bit, and then the rescuer. So it's quite a loop, and once it starts going, it's going. So I have a little video that demonstrates it really well. This gentleman's a really great presenter and describes it well, and he gives a healthcare example. So I'm just going to forward to that next. And I'll just warn you, when I started, it starts right out with music. So it's a little bit loud, but it's really engaging and not too long. So just a second here.
I'm going to show you a pattern of behavior that shows itself every single day in the places where you work. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Employee number 1 is unhappy with something said or done by employee number 2. Does employee number 1 go directly to employee number 2 and say, "This really bothered me and I feel like we should talk about it like adults, calmly and with respect"? Does that happen? No, of course not. You know why? Because we are hardwired to more favorably judge ourselves and more harshly judge others. So what does employee number 1 do instead? He goes to another. Sometimes the other is you. "Hey boss, I've had it with Sue. I have roomed 10 patients this morning and she has only roomed 2 patients this morning, and I don't know what's in her feet, but she ain't moving fast enough. You need to fix that. You need to light a fire under her butt, because I am not going to keep on like this." And that's the point at which you open your drawer, pull out your manager's magic wand, and fix that problem, right? That's why you make the not so big bucks, yes? Oh, you don't have the manager magic wand? Well, if you go to my website for $199.99, I can give you... No, I'm just kidding. But sometimes, as a leader, we might say, okay, I'll go talk to Sue and try to figure out what's happening. They'll get involved. Or sometimes employee number one doesn't go to their boss. They go to a coworker. And they go over here in the corner and they say, can you believe that I have roomed 10 patients this morning and she has only roomed 2? I have had it with Susie and her only rooming 2 people every morning. And you know what the other person says? I know. I have been so over her for so long. Do you know that I do laps around her, literal laps around her? And they're off in the corner going, chur, 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 chur. But an interesting thing happens in this pattern of behavior. People assume roles, and these roles have names. Employee number one is the victim. I'm the victim. I'm being wronged. I am helpless in this situation. The other person that employee number one goes to, well, they're the rescuer. And in this pattern of behavior, they take on the hero role. But it's not an altruistic thing. It's not a, wow, this person really needs help and support, and so I'm going to stop what I'm doing to do that. No! It's fun to be included in the gossip. It feels good to be trusted with your secret of how much you don't like Sue and her room and only 2 patients style. So it's not an altruistic thing. And last but not least, that employee number 2, they're the persecutor, and they are evil in this pattern of behavior. We see these play out in the workplace every single day. And this happens for a very simple reason. Because it is far easier to seek out the comfort of validation than it is to step into the discomfort of confrontation. We don't expect it of our employees. We don't teach them how to do it. But we need to start. But wait, it gets worse. Because here's what happens. Let's say you as the boss go to Sue and say, hey Sue, I just wanted to check with you. It seems like, you've only roomed like 2 patients this morning and that you're not moving fast enough. And you know what Sue says? Did Lisa tell you that she roomed 10 patients this morning? I saw her and Mary over there in the corner, talking about this. She didn't tell you that I had a 45-minute intake with a crazy person. She didn't tell you that I got here late because the doctor stopped me and said, you need to answer the phones for 20 minutes out front because we're short-staffed. Did she tell you any of that? No, she didn't. And something interesting just happened. All of a sudden, she became the victim. And you know what she does? She goes to another and says, can you believe that our boss came to me talking about I only roomed 2 patients this morning when so-and-so roomed 10. And you know what the other person says? I know. I am so tired of her sticking her nose into our business. She doesn't even know what goes on out here. She's just in her office all the time doing reports. So they go back to the boss and say, we're really bothered by the fact that you brought this to our attention. We don't think it's fair. We think you were really unfair to us. And you go, fine. But wait. Then you go home. And you sit across the table from your spouse or partner. And you say to him or her, do you believe that these people are coming to me and telling me that I'm sticking my nose in where it doesn't belong? Can you believe the audacity of these people? And if your spouse or partner wants to stay married, do you know what they say? I know. Of course, if that spouse or partner wants an exit strategy, what they could say is, well, honey, maybe it's you. Which, it turns out, is the healthier response.
There we go. So just wanting to give credit to him. Obviously, that's not my video. So his name is Joe Mall. He actually has a channel on YouTube and offers a lot of different helpful videos, and I find it really quite engaging. So he's a great resource to turn to. Let's see if I can, there we go. Yeah, so hopefully that made you chuckle a little bit, and you recognized some of the cycles or things that may be playing out in your workplace. So just elaborating more on this whole concept of workplace drama and a drama triangle. So it can involve many different forms. Sometimes it's power struggles. I hear that, like, whose job is it? And I was in a long-term care facility recently, and it was the discussion about whose job was it to pack up the patient's clothes after they passed away. So sometimes it's like, is it this department's or that department's? Sometimes it can be insubordination. It can be gossip, or even some arguments in the workplace. So if you're wondering, am I involved in workplace drama, or is this happening in my workplace? These are some frequent signs. So if you're having difficult conversations with people, you're really worrying about a lot of mistakes, you feel like you need to like hide something because I feel like insecure, or like people are going to talk about me, all that is a sign that there's some unhealthy drama that's happening in that workplace. And so what does the research tell us? So the research tells us that on average, a staff member spends 2.5 hours per day distracted by dramatic coworkers, which I think is a powerful number. That's 2.5 hours a day taken away from us being able to get our work done. And something that, we should address is that workplace incivility or workplace drama really erodes trust, and it contributes to a lack of psychological safety for us feeling like safe in the workplace. So I just want to make the note about the difference between what we've been talking about and actual workplace harassment. So workplace harassment is improper conduct by an individual. Again, this definition is from the Wellness and Inclusion Diversity Public Service. It's a commission through Canada. But it's that improper conduct is directed at or offensive to another individual in the workplace, or in any event or anything that's related to the workplace, where the individual ought to know or should reasonably know that it would cause offense or harm. So it's those objectionable acts, comments, displays that demean, belittle, cause personal humiliation and embarrassment, and any act of intimidation or threat. It may include something that relates to the Human Rights Act. It could be related to race, ethnicity, religion, age, sex, all these different things. Not necessarily, but it may. It's usually a series of incidents, but it can be one severe incident which has a lasting impact on the individual. So what we know about workplace incivility is that if it's not addressed and it goes unchecked, it is more likely for there to be workplace harassment, which is more serious. So what does research tell us? And this came out of a task force that's for studying harassment in the workplace. There are generally some things that can be done to prevent and address harassment. So the first is if we have a committed and engaged leadership. So whether that's our nurse manager, or director of nursing, our resource nurses, but when more they're committed and engaged, the less likely there is to be some harassment. If there's consistent and demonstrated accountability, so everyone's held to the same standards. If there's strong and comprehensive harassment policies, that's helpful. If we know that there's a trusted and accessible complaint procedure, and also some regular interactive training tailored to the audience in the organization. And so this last bullet is something that my company provides. So we're all healthcare providers, we're all educators, and we often go into workplaces and provide training like this. I mean, the only part that's missing where this is a webinar is we're skipping all the interactive exercises, but it is really helpful just to open the conversation. So I'm just going to go through some more suggested strategies that are focused around workplace drama. So that workplace incivility. So we're kind of coming back out of the harassment loop and getting back into that general incivility and workplace drama. So there's kind of two categories that I'm going to go through. One are just anecdotal, just things that I've seen through my travels of helping homes, things that people have shared that have worked. And the next I'll go through some research-based themes. So anecdotally, I worked with or was affiliated with one care home that had instituted something called the 24-hour rule. And I actually think that they got it from their child's hockey team. So it may sound familiar to you, but they really were having a challenge with when there were a lot of complaints that everybody was going immediately to the nurse manager and complaining. And so they instituted a rule that if something is an issue, you really need to wait 24 hours before bringing it to management. And if it's still an issue for you, if it's still bothering you after 24 hours, then it can be addressed. And they found a huge turnaround. People were just more able to be like, okay, and acknowledging maybe like that's just something I was putting in the bitter bag. Like it really isn't that big. I need to let that go. And so really just that 24-hour rule was very helpful for them. Another home I worked with instituted this one, and hopefully you can see all the bullet points. So Rotary International is a nonprofit organization, and they have a 4-way test that they talk about in their organization, and they use it all over the world. So of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And is it beneficial to all? So one home I worked with really, played this out and it was posted everywhere and everyone was reminded and really kind of worked through some different scenarios, and it really helped to change their own language. Another home I worked with instituted a policy where, if there was minor complaints, they needed to be dealt with interpersonally. So really encouraging people to sort it out amongst each other. And then if you did need some more help to work through whatever the disagreement was, that it had to go through a formal process where you had to write down a written complaint, and that everybody in the room had to come together to find a solution. And they found success with that as well. So some more of the themes from the research that have come out. And again, I'm just sharing these just to give you some ideas about your own workplace and different things in our own behavior. So one theme that came out clearly in the research is that if we wanted to improve workplace civility, we needed to demonstrate that we were civil in the workplace. So we really needed to be a good role model. And that was consistent whether we held a leadership position or not. So obviously we can't be engaging in the same behavior we want to eliminate. And just remembering that with our coworkers, we're always on stage. People are always, watching what we're doing and judging us. Theme number 2 is just remembering that if the discussion is not work related, it's appropriate to not engage at all. And I would really encourage everyone to not engage either. Sometimes it's helpful to have kind of a ready comment in these instances. So if you know that you work with one coworker who tends to gossip quite a bit or try to bring you into that workplace drama triangle, you might have a statement, and none of these are perfect. You have to perfect your own, and they may seem not authentic, but it may be things like, your answer might be, I'm not comfortable talking about Bob without him here. Do I need to know this to do my work today? Or that's Bob's personal business and I don't want to discuss it, or I'm really not interested. And so those are situations when you do that remove you from that workplace drama triangle. Okay. Theme 3 in dealing with workplace civility is it's really important when there's a challenge or a discussion that needs to be had that we have everyone in the room for the discussion. So ideally, we would never allow a conversation about someone without everyone in the room. And I know that I would respect that if someone had a challenge with me. I'd like to be there and to hear about it and to participate in that discussion. Really challenging us not to be afraid to have those difficult discussions. There's a lot of research out there and even a few books that'll use the term crucial conversation. That's something you can look up, and it gives lots of tips and tricks about how to have that crucial conversation. So it's just some examples here. If someone brings a challenge to you, so say I'm sitting here at this desk and someone comes in and says, well, I really, I have a challenge working with Lacey. I'm just making up a name. And so I could say, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'm going to go get Lacey so we can talk through this together. Because the only way we're going to get to the other side of this is by us having a collaborative conversation. What I encourage people to say is so I wouldn't talk about you without you there. So I'm going to do the same. Now, the difference can happen, and again, this is just talking about workplace incivility. Sometimes there's a different process when we actually get to the level of harassment and some other things. So I just want to make that distinction. Theme 4 is in workplaces where everyone was held accountable and there was clear consequences for actions, then people were more civil. So that could look like having a clear code of conduct, a clear harassment policy. Maybe all complaints are taken in writing. But again, it's important with these. It's important to act early, to not let things continue. It's important to intervene soon. Another theme that was important was to reward those who don't engage. So those of us who step away from the drama who don't participate, sometimes we can be discouraged because it feels like all the energy goes to those who are participating. So if your workplace can do any rewards towards those who don't engage or acknowledging it, that is really positive. The more time we spend focusing on good behavior and rewarding that and celebrating success, the more we can change the tone, the culture of a unit. And the last theme that came out, which I found really interesting, was that anything we can do in terms of towards workplace wellness. So workplaces that implement a workplace wellness program and different things like that, there seems to be a positive effect overall in terms of workplace civility. And so sometimes when you don't know where to start and you think, gosh, I don't really have any control over any of this, I'm here. Maybe it's that you can contribute and start towards like a workplace wellness program and focus your efforts that way, because there does seem to be a byproduct of an effect where that's positive as well in other areas. So I know I've thrown a lot of information at you. That was just kind of a quick sample of what we would cover in a 3-hour session. And I just wanted to share with you some of the sample discussion questions we would do in workplaces. So after we'd gone through a lot of these skills, we always talk about what is the one thing that we can start doing differently at work, but also what is the one thing that you would like to see changed in your own workplace. Because that's really, what we can do as nurses. We can think about what is our place and what can we change, but then also like, what do we need to ask for? And do we have suggested solutions? And then working collaboratively with our employer to try to tackle it. So I just want to thank you all so much for joining us here on the webinar.